What's going on, guys? My name is Steve. Thank you for stopping by my channel. Today we're going to be reacting to how much do you need to earn to be rich in the UK? This is actually something I've been curious about for quite a while now. Not only how much do you need to earn to be rich in the UK, but what does your average rich person in the UK look like? And I don't mean physical features. I mean, what type of car do they drive? What type of house do they live in? What type of employment do they have? I'm very curious about things like that because I know in the US at least, a lot of people are under the impression when you talk about someone being rich, they think private jets, they think mansions, they think Lamborghinis, they think just all sorts of luxuries and things like that. But truth be told, when you look at your average wealthy person in the US at least, they generally don't live too much differently than your average person with an average income, because you don't have to be making millions of dollars a year to be considered rich. You know, rich is, I don't know the exact salary of rich in the US, but it's a good salary, obviously, but it's not like millions of dollars a year. That's super rich. You know, rich is more like a couple $100,000, a few $100,000 a year type of salary. So I'm really curious what this is going to look like in terms of being wealthy in the UK, how much income they make, and what's the type of lifestyle they have. I'm not sure if this video is going to go into the lifestyle factors or not, but either way, this should be very interesting. So let's just go ahead and dive in and check out how much do you need to earn to be rich in the UK?
How much do you think you'd need to earn in the UK to be in the top 10% of taxpayers? Maybe 100K, maybe more? And what kinds of job would you need to do to earn that kind of money? And then a more important question, how much do you think you'd need to earn to feel rich? Whatever that means to you. Hold those numbers and I'll get the answer in just a second. So there are almost 30 million people right now on the UK payroll, and that's according to the latest data from the Office of National Statistics. And that's actually the highest it's ever been, at least since they started collecting their records since 2014. Now, we've got all of the latest information here of earnings by age, your location, your industry, and then probably the most interesting one to me, we've got the sheet that tells us how much you need to earn to be in the top 50%, the top 10%, and then here, the top 1% of earners. So, want to know how much you need to earn to be in the top 1%? Let's go and have a look. If you want to be in the top 50% of people here in the UK, you'll need to be earning £26,340.
Wow.
And yes, all of these figures are before the taxman's got his grubby mitts on your money. If you want a monthly figure, that's £2,195 a month. Now, is that more or less than you thought? Anyway, that puts you firmly in the middle, but what about the big money? If you want to be in the top 25%, then you're going to need £40,920 coming in a year, which works out to be £3,410 each month. Again, is that surprising to you? Did you expect higher or did you expect a bit lower? Now, that kind of money can be found in jobs like being a solicitor, a marketing manager, and in Band 8 roles in the public sector.
Right.
Okay, but what about the big money? Here's what you'd need to earn to be in the top 10% of taxpayers in the UK. I'd love to know if you guess what this is before.
Wow. Okay. Well, the other two are actually lower than I would have thought. To be, you know, literally be in the top 25%, you need to make £40,000, which is, off the top of my head, what is that like? Is that like 40? I'm going to say it's like around probably $47,000. I don't know exactly, but somewhere around that, I'm guessing. And so that's generally the type of salary you'll see in a teacher, maybe a mailman, a postal worker, things like that. So that's honestly surprising. That's generally what you see on a lot of your average employment. That's interesting. Okay, I'm going to guess here that the top 10%, based off of these numbers now, I'm going to say, £100,000. That sounds about right. I have no idea, but that's just based off of those numbers to get to the top 10%. We'll see.
The salary you need is £62,160, or the equivalent monthly take-home of £5,180.
That's interesting. Let me know if I'm wrong, or I'll probably look this up later, but I think that's roughly probably about $70,000, give or take. And it's very interesting that that's a number that was thrown around for a long time here in the U.S. They said basically that once a person reached $70,000 in income higher than that didn't increase their happiness that much. It was like, I don't remember what it was called. It was like the happiness income scale or something like that. But there comes a point where you reach a certain income that you not only can pay for your everyday expenses fairly easily, your mortgage, your food and everything, but you also have enough money to save a little bit and maybe go on a vacation here or there, things like that. And so once you get to that place where you can provide for yourself comfortably and you can get a few wants or luxuries, increasing your income by after that point doesn't really increase your happiness all that much. Now in 2023, I'm thinking that number is probably going up because inflation has gone through the roof. So I'm guessing in the US that number is now probably closer to $100,000. But I don't know. But this is pretty surprising to me. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, $70,000, if that's what this is, we'll say 62,000 pounds. I'm thinking that's a pretty good income, but to think that would be the top 10%, that's wild. I wouldn't have thought that. I may be thinking in terms of someone being in London, because I'm definitely thinking somewhere like London would have a average higher salary than for a lot of the country, right? But anyways, guys, let's go ahead and continue.
Surprised? Personally, I thought this would be a lot higher, and I remember looking at this information a few years back and thinking, wow, that seemed low to me. Anyway, may as well complete this list. To get into the top 5%, you're now looking...
Top 5%, well, I'm going to stay at 100,000.
Looking at £84,600, or a monthly take-home of £7,050.
Wow, I mean, that's good money.
And if you want to be part of this exclusive 1% club, right now in the UK...
100,000.
You'd need to be earning a whopping, wait for it, £175,416.
Wow.
Or £14,618 per month.
Okay, that's good money.
That's a lot of money. And just think, that's really good income of around 300,000 people here in the UK. Now, rather than just tell you this information and end the video, what I really want to dig into for you is two things. Firstly, I want to take you through the rest of this data to let you know the kinds of industries you need to be looking at if you want to earn the big money. And then secondly, I want to talk about a bit what it means to be rich and how this earned money is only really just a small part of what we actually need to try to build our own wealth. Right then.
That's kind of what I wanted to dive into in a little bit as well. But I'm guessing you guys in the UK are the same way as in the US. Generally speaking, your average person obviously doesn't make a salary in the top 1% or even the top 5%, or obviously average don't make top 10%. But if someone just starts at an early age and saves a little bit each year, they can be wealthy as they get into an older age. Unfortunately, for most of us, we didn't get that memo, early on. So be a little harder for a lot of us. But anyways, let's continue.
Let's break this down by industry, because there's probably a lot of you out there thinking you want a slice of that 1%, or you might even be thinking, what industries do you need to get your kids
Lawyer,
into?
doctor.
So here goes. As you can see, the highest paying sector on average is finance and insurance.
Oh, yeah.
Now, just bear in mind these averages are now mean averages, not median averages. So these will look quite high, as they can easily get skewed by some pretty big earners. So for our finance and insurance earnings, we're looking at over £91,000. This leads the way by quite a big margin. And then coming up in second place is mining and quarrying, interestingly enough. And filling up spots 3, 4, and 5 is information and communication.
Miners get paid pretty
energy
good
production
in the
and
US,
supply,
so I'm guessing
and
it's in
then
the UK.
Professional, scientific, and technical, whatever that's supposed to mean. It's probably quite a broad category. Now, on the low end, here are the sectors that apparently pay the least: agriculture, accommodation and food services, and then households and extraterritorial. Another idea I have no clue about at all.
Households.
Now, whatever it is, the average salary is just £17,700. So if you're looking to make some money, this one would be good to avoid.
House cleaners, babysitters, and things like that?
Without anyone else to support or care for. following on from this, as I was researching this video, I asked all of you on YouTube on my community page what amount of money you'd need to feel rich. I left it pretty vague what I meant by the word rich because I really just wanted to get the conversation going, and I was really surprised by the results that all of you voted on. So I gave you different categories of annual salary from 45k all the way up well into the six figures and beyond. And I did that on purpose, knowing that even if you chose the lowest band, that still puts you in the top 25% of earners in the UK.
Yes, true.
I think the most interesting takeaway here is that in order to feel rich, you guys really do want a lot of money. And the biggest category chosen was, unsurprisingly, 150k and above with 34% of the vote, followed closely by the 100k to 150k category. Then finally, in third place, we have the 85k to 100k range. Now, bear in mind from the data earlier, all of these categories put you in the top 5% of earners in the country, but most of you would want to be much closer to that 1% to feel rich.
I think that's...
Now, knowing what you know now
sense.
about the rest of the country, would you change your vote? Maybe a subject for another poll after this video.
How much money would it take for you to feel wealthy? I don't know. I haven't really thought about that much, but that's a very interesting question. I think once you reach six figures, I think at that point, you might not feel rich, but if you're not living in a very high cost of living area, say in the UK, London, or in the US, that would be New York or San Francisco or something like that. If you're living more in an average, medium or small city, and you made 100,000 pounds or over $100,000 a year, you're probably going to live a pretty good life. And so I think once you reach six figures in most areas, you're probably feeling 80 to 90% of what you would need to feel in order to feel pretty rich. I mean, when you can pay for everything you want and need, and then you can get a few luxuries here or there. But anyways, let me know in the comments, guys, how much would it take you to actually feel rich or very, very, very comfortable, we'll say.
Saying that this is hardly representative of the country, as people who watch finance and investing YouTube channels are likely to be higher earners than the average. As in order to actually invest, you do need to be in a position to have disposable income.
Yeah, that's true.
And you tend to be skewed a little bit older as well. However, although this might not be the most scientifically accurate survey ever done, there have been other ones that have asked people similar questions. I came across this article in The Independent, which reads, more than half of Britons on 80k per year think they earn about average. It refers to a study done by the New Statesman, where they also found that even those who earned around 40k per year considered themselves normal rather than fortunate.
That makes sense to me.
Following on from this, here's one thing I think that really stands out. It goes on to say that people are likely to underestimate their salary against an average in the country, and also 43% of those with incomes between 100k and 120k thought that their social circles were better off than they were. I think I'd definitely be in the same boat when I look back over the years. You always think other people are better off than you.
Yeah,
and there's this constant battle to look the part, keep up with the Joneses, which really ends up all just being a big waste of money. Also, I do get it. These amounts of money sound like small fortunes, but as some of you pointed out in the comments of the poll, after taxes and then all of your bills, you can easily spend large sums of money. It does all come down to affordability, and in some parts of the country, what might seem like a large salary won't go anywhere near as far as a cheaper part of the country with a lower salary. So perspective and many other factors have to come into play to really make someone feel rich. Staying on the topic of rich, honestly, this is a whole other video topic, but let's just break down what rich might look like and take an example of someone who must obviously be rich. I think a good place to start would be the Football Premier League. So I did a quick search and found out the highest paid player right now is apparently Kevin De Bruyne. He plays for Manchester City, which is just a couple of miles away from me right now. His contract is 400k per week, and this works out to be an annual salary of £20,800,000.
Nice. That's a pretty nice
Assuming
salary.
that all goes through the income tax system, every month he'll likely see this kind of paycheck, £919,523, so just shy of £1 million per month. And then across the whole year, his take-home pay will be £11 million. That's £9 million worth of taxes, which should cover HMRC's Christmas party this year. Now, even with taxes, there's no argument that he's still wildly rich. But does a high income really mean that he's wealthy? And then, without getting out our tiny violin and feeling sorry for him, is getting paid a lot of money actually all it's hyped up to be? I
Not
mean, just
always.
from a professional sports perspective, apparently their average career length is just 8 years. And while Kevin might be fine with his 400k a week, many of them don't end up in such a great position. From data I could find from a US perspective, which is probably similar to here in the UK, a Sports Illustrated article reports that 78% of NFL players and 60% of NBA players face serious financial hardships after retirement. Now, there's obviously a ton of reasons.
Why? I've always wondered that. I knew that. And it just makes no sense. I mean, I understand it on an emotional level, I guess. Most of these players are raised in average households, and a lot of them are even poor and in very low income households when they're kids, and that's why they end up playing sports really hard, get really good at them, get scholarships and things like that, and then they end up going pro and making a ton of money. And all of a sudden, you go from having this low income or average income upbringing to just having millions of dollars, and they just go crazy with it. And a lot of them are also very young when they get this high salary, and so it just they just aren't responsible with it. I can understand. I think most of us, myself, and most of the people watching this, if all of a sudden especially if you're at least into your late 20s, into your 30s or later, you're probably smart enough to stop and think, what would I do with that money if I had it? And you would be a little bit more careful instead of just blowing it on buying a personal jet and a bunch of Lamborghinis and stuff like that. You'd be a little more intelligent with it than I think a lot of these people are when all of a sudden they're 20 years old, they get multi-million-dollar contracts and they just don't even know what to do with it and they go wild.
Reasons why this is, and something we can go really into depth on, probably in another video. But I do think this is an interesting topic for us because it leads us on to another thing, talking about wealth and why actually having a high income won't necessarily make you feel rich. Really, it's about what you do with that income, and sometimes, as you'll see now, some of the wealthiest people in the UK aren't really focused on building up their earned income. It's all about building wealth. So let's go and see what that really means. So why don't we start somewhere on the Sunday Times rich list? We've seen what they earn in the Premier League, and while they make a ton of money, you're not going to find a footballer here at the top. These are the wealthiest people in the UK based on adding up all of their assets. And there's similar ones for the US and the world, but let's keep this one local. Right at the top, you have the Hinduja family, you've got James Dyson, and you'll even find the Prime Minister and his wife Akshata Murthy all the way in the basement of position 222 with just a small £730 million joint fortune. Now, I wonder if they feel poor amongst all of these people in their social circles. Maybe we'll save that for another video. One thing you'll see in common for a lot of these names is that their wealth is often tied to some kind of big business. And it's once you add up all of their shares in those businesses that you really start to see where real wealth is made. So just as an example, up here in position number 6 is the Mittals, and they own the big company ArcelorMittal, which is a steel producing and mining giant. Now, would you be surprised to hear that their salaries as chief executive and executive chairman are way less than some Premier League footballers? Well, let me show you here. On the company's latest annual report, if you dive all the way to page 221, you'll see the pay packages of each of them. The numbers are based in thousands, so you have to multiply them up to get the actual salaries. And if we take the executive chairman here as an example, his salary for the last year was $1.5 million. But this is only a small part of the package. The rest of the earnings and what really builds wealth is the short-term and long-term share incentives. As long as the company does well and meets certain targets, he'll make another 4 times as much on top through those shares. And then, with a bit of luck, those shares can also end up growing in value too. And this isn't unique to this company. You'll see this all over the business world, as earned income is typically taxed a lot higher than assets, which are usually left untouched until you have to sell them or get dividends. The super well-off people with real wealth on this list could potentially just live off their assets, not earn a penny more and pay any income tax, or even just take bank loans against their assets and use those to pay for their living expenses. There's probably a whole host of other ways people can do this, but still a pretty interesting one to think about. Now, just sticking to this whole topic of wealth, let's zoom out a bit and look at the UK as a whole. We do have some data here from Warwick University, and the study they did where they looked at how wealth is distributed across the UK and what kind of levels of wealth that you need to be a top percentage household. Also, even more importantly, I think, they show what kinds of assets make up their wealth. And I'll tell you now, it's not cash coming in from their day job that's their biggest source of wealth, even if that obviously did help in the first place. One of the biggest findings in this report is the fact that wealth is concentrated heavily in the top 10% of households. And as you can see on this chart, which shows each 10% section running from the lowest to the highest, the biggest jump is from the top 20% to the top 10%. The top 20% of households have a net worth of £600,000, but to be part of that exclusive 10% club, you need to have a minimum of £1.5 million worth of assets. I think this is really interesting when you compare that to the earnings we covered at the start of the video, because earning a top 10% income is not going to get you into the top 10% of household wealth anytime soon.
Generally speaking, I believe what's happening here is, these people have earned a high enough income that they could save quite a bit, or they bought very heavy into their house. They bought a very nice house, or their real estate went up in value, the house they were living in. And so their household income is up, not because they had an extremely high salary, but because they saved and invested more of what they earned, is my guess.
Unless you're super careful and invest your money, which the top 10% do, and I'll touch on that in just a moment.
Right.
Another part of this report here on page 13 actually shows us what the top 10% looks like if we break it down further into individual percentages. What this now shows us is that the top 1% is where most of the wealth is held. And this is what skews the averages for the rest of the top 10%. As you can see, most of the wealth needed to be in the top 10% is around the £1 million mark. But unless you have over £5 million of wealth, I'm sorry, but you're not getting into that top 1% anytime soon. Although we could ask if any Manchester City players have got any spare cash lying around. So the big question, what makes up that millions of pounds worth of wealth? Is it gold coins, fancy artwork, whiskey, or is it a lot more boring than that? Page 14 of the same report tells us everything we need to know, and here it is on screen now. So we're back to each section running from the left to right, from the lowest 10% to the highest 10%. And as you can see, the biggest difference really is two major kinds of assets, pensions and property. Pensions, we can see here, start to make up between 40 and 50% of all wealth in the wealthier households. And then property shows a similar trend, making up between 30% and almost 50% in groups above the average. I think one of the biggest takeaways from this is that owning assets that have historically done very well and tend to increase in value above the rate of inflation really improves the wealth of those people who own a part of it. Well, duh. The problem is that if only one part of society keeps buying those assets and has the means to own them, the gap between the richest and the poorest just keeps getting bigger, as if you never have the means to buy assets, then you end up in a difficult situation, which millions of people in the UK find themselves in every single day. Now, I don't have the solution for that, but I do think that if that gap widens too much, we put ourselves in a very dangerous place. Maybe another topic for another video. So now you've seen the data and we've seen what it means to be rich in the UK and what the top few percent earn. Let me again ask you a question that I'd love for you to drop in the comments below on. What would you need in order to feel rich? I'm not going to define anything or give you any more than that. And you don't have to even give numbers for a salary. Just let me know what you'd need to happen. It might even just be a feeling, or it could just be something as simple as saying, once my mortgage is paid off, I'll feel rich. Or once I've paid off my last bit of debt, that's me set. If it helps, I'll start. And rich for me is having complete financial freedom where I can do pretty much whatever I want each day, knowing that all of my bills are covered and there's enough left to do some fun stuff as well.
All right, guys, this was interesting. I definitely learned a few things about what it means to be rich in the UK. Not only that, I got an idea of what the average salary is, and it's surprisingly lower than I thought. But I think if I look at the US, I think I would see the same thing. I have looked at the US numbers a long time ago, and they did always surprise me on how low the income was to be, say, in the top 10%, because when you think of top 10% or top 5% or even top 1%, you know, the thought that the average person's mind goes to is that these people are living luxurious lives that are just amazing. And that's not always the case, especially for, say, the top 10% or 5%. The top 1% probably are generally living pretty luxurious lives. But, you know, a top 10% earner is probably the guy you see walking down the street or in the US driving a Honda Civic and just living a completely normal life. He is not living extravagant in any way. But as for the question, we kind of covered this earlier, but what does it mean to be considered rich? To me, I also, like him, probably wouldn't put a number to it. I think for me, it's more of an emotional feeling. And that feeling is the having, basically owning the house I live in and a small piece of property, not having that many bills, but the bills I do have, I can easily pay. And, and I can easily afford to do some things like go on a vacation here or there, take care of family and whatnot. But even beyond that, I think rich or wealthy is more than just financial terms. We can talk about like, rich is relationships, and that is true. But to be truly rich, I feel like you need to be time rich. If I had to choose between time rich and financial rich, or money rich, however you want to put that, I would definitely choose time rich. Obviously, you need to have enough money to live comfortably. You don't want to be like struggling like crazy. But if I'm comfortable, if I can pay the bills, get by, and have a little bit left over to do some fun things, what I want then is to have extra time. Because you know what, you can always go out there and make more money. You can't get time back. So time is definitely the most important asset you have. They're not making any more time. So definitely use your time wisely, guys. But anyways, guys, I thought this was interesting. Thank you so much for stopping by. Please click that like button and feel free to drop your comments or suggestions about this video or others. And don't forget to subscribe to continue to follow me on my journey to discover my British and Irish ancestry. Till next time, guys. Peace.